Welcome to the Dr.Vegan We'll See You Now series. This is our way of trying to help people live a healthier, happier life. Our healthcare system is somewhat struggling, in large part due to an obesity crisis and a diabetes crisis. Medical schools don't teach nutrition to doctors as a standard part of the training. But invariably, doctors will receive less than 2 days, in most cases less than 2 hours of training. And doctors, unless they've had a separate nutrition qualification, are not permitted to give nutrition advice. So where are people getting nutrition advice? Kids are not receiving it in schools. Most of us adults are having to do the research on its own. The Dr.Vegan We'll See You Now series is here to help you understand how you can live a happier, healthier life through great experts who we're going to speak to now. So it's my pleasure to introduce Evie Whitehead. Evie Whitehead is a registered nutritional therapist with 10 years experience in gut health, current practicing nutritionist working with lots of clients across the UK. She's a self-confessed gut geek. She's a gut health podcast speaker, and she's the founder of the healthy eating program, Eat Better, Feel Better. Evie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
First question, how did you get into nutrition?
Oh, well, that happened a long time ago, but it happened because I had a young family to feed. So when I was a stay-at-home mum, I had my firstborn and then fell pregnant with twins quite soon after that, and I got a bit overwhelmed about how I was going to bring this small family up in the best way possible. And I had a background passion for human biology and specialising really in reading around digestion and gut. And so there was my sort of background passion. And so bringing the two together, nutritional therapy seemed to be the best route forward. So that's how I got into it.
And I presume in the early years, seeing your children thrive and being healthy was a real satisfaction. Today, what do you love most about what you do?
It's just really being able to make a difference to people who are really struggling, who haven't had the answers or the solutions or tried different routes to solve their problem, and being able to give them some really tangible and realistic, achievable steps that can make them feel back to normal, just to make that difference. They start to love their food again and not be scared of food. It's just a really important part of enjoying your life.
Given your passion for nutrition, what is your view on nutrition education in the UK?
Well, it's non-existent, and I would love it to be more prevalent in the schools. So starting with the children at school, I would love them to learn more as part of their curriculum. But I do understand that probably has its challenges, and I'm not a teacher, so I don't understand what those challenges are. But from my own experience, and I can only go on that, is that our nutritional education usually starts at home with how we experience food, whether it's a positive or negative experience. That usually forms the basis of how we move ahead with that. And so I think having a very positive family or nutrition structure at home, cooking food from scratch and teaching children how to eat properly and the best food for their health is what we should be aiming to do.
So it really comes from the parents?
I think so. I think that's how I learnt, and I think the problem is parents are time poor and they're stressed and, working and trying to put food on the table and within your budget has become more and more challenging. And so the quick fixes probably are the obstacles.
So gut health, we all know it's really important. Give us your perspective on why gut health is so important.
Well, we've got this tube, haven't we, that starts here and ends at the other end, and everything that goes into that tube is actually not inside our body yet. So when we think about the food we're putting into that tube, our gut is the interface between the outside world and how that food is going to get broken down, absorbed, and then hopefully delivered to, neurons, muscles, brain, everything to give you the energy and give your cells and the organs what they need to function. So the gut becomes a critical part of that, the first step. I just can't think of a better place to start in improving someone's health. It should start with improving their nutrition that supports better gut health.
And how much do you think we know about gut health?
Tiny amount. We're at the tip of the iceberg and it's very exciting, but I feel like there's so much to know.
And how do you stay ahead of all the research that's coming out?
I think podcasts are a great way to learn. And just while you're doing something like a dog walk or something like that, you can just really keep up to date on some of the latest developments. But for me, I have to complete 30 hours of continuous professional development to maintain my qualification and my accreditation. So I listen to lots and lots of lectures and webinars, which I really enjoy. That's how I stay abreast of it, and science magazines and talking to people like you about, what's going on in the world.
So what are the common signs that someone's gut health might be out of balance?
Well, I can think of the most common symptoms that my clients come to me when they're struggling with their gut. And probably the primary symptom that they complain about most commonly is fatigue. So really feeling low energy, just not feeling themselves. But beyond that, which is much more obviously related to the gut, is bloating, gassy, both ends, and also feeling just not right. There's a general feeling. People are a lot more in tune than they think, and they know when something's just not right in the gut. And it just doesn't feel good.
It feels out of balance.
Yeah, and that can create sort of further reaching symptoms that you might not connect directly to the gut. So it might even be something like brain fog or joint pain or skin conditions. So dry skin. There's so many far-reaching symptoms.
Where it could be out of balance, leading to something else, or contributing to one of those things.
Definitely.
There's a lot of talk about the impact of gut health on mental health, and that's through the gut-brain axis. Can you talk us through about that? What is the gut-brain axis and how they're related?
I'll do my best, but it is quite complex. The way I describe it is a bi-directional highway that connects our brain to our gut. So our gut is lined with millions and millions of tiny nerve cells, and that is called our enteric nervous system, and that's connected to our brain via the vagus nerve. And messages are sent from the gut up to the brain through this nerve, and equally the messages move the other way, in the other direction, so they can go from the brain back to the gut.
So the butterflies in the stomach.
Exactly. So that's how we might experience that sensation of the brain triggering something, that a message that goes to the gut. You might have something exciting coming up or a nervous situation, and the messages go from the gut to the brain, and that might cause butterflies or that feeling of excitement, and that can quite often have an impact on your digestive system and other things around gut.
And would that be the reason why when people are stressed, actually it's very common for them to experience gut health issues? And likewise, if they've got gut health issues, to your earlier point, fatigue is very often one of the most common symptoms of poor gut health.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to untangle, isn't it, when you think about how connected it is. And so lots of clients who come to me with, let's say they've got IBS, I will ask them to spend some time thinking about where they think the message comes from first. Where do they feel it first? Because it's actually sometimes milliseconds, one behind the other. It's quite difficult to work out. Am I having thoughts that are triggering a tummy problem? Or is the fluttering in my tummy triggering anxiety? And so it works both ways.
What are the top gut-nourishing foods that you think we should all have that aren't going to break the bank and should be a part of our daily diet?
I would always recommend probiotic-rich foods, maybe some kefir and live yogurt, because that doesn't break the bank, and we know that has a lot of health benefits and can really enhance your gut microbiome in a very beneficial way. So that's a nice thing to have in the fridge. And then something else I like to recommend are things like herbs and spices. We forget about the power of the tiny things like some dried herbs or some fresh herbs on your soup, or your salad, or your dinner. A very powerful source of antioxidants and polyphenols that we know nourish the gut microbiome and reduce inflammation. So that's the key thing to remember about the herbs and spices, that they do matter, and it doesn't matter if they're dried or fresh. Other things I would recommend would be pulses like beans, lentils, chickpeas. However, they are quite difficult for some to tolerate in larger amounts, so we might need to
why are
that
they
apart.
difficult to tolerate in large quantities?
They're very high source of fibre, so they're a fibre-rich food. And if eaten in large amounts and you're not used to that amount of fibre, when that fibre reaches the large bowel, in the bacteria that are there ferment the fibre, and that can cause gas, a bit of burbling. So it can cause some problems for some people, but It's important that we try and still include those in our diet because they're a really important part of our diet. It's more about getting the diversity in. So if I say plant-based foods, I would explain this to any listeners or my clients as trying to pick a variety of colours. It's quite an easy way to break that down. So, pick something green, something deep coloured like beetroot or tomatoes or kale. Trying to have that nice range of diversity of vegetables and whole grains, nuts, seeds, all of those sort of different types of fibre.
What's something that you'll always have in your fridge or cupboard to support your gut health?
Oh, God, it would have to be my bag of nuts and seeds. I have them all the time. I have them in little jars. I love them so much. I have little jars on my kitchen side with little spoons on the side, and I add them to my meals at various times because I just enjoy them so much, and I know the benefits of them. I've seen the studies and the science, and they're a really good healthy fat for us to include. It's good to have a variety of them, and they just add nice texture. So they add a bit of crunch and texture to your food, so it makes it a bit more interesting, as well as providing these anti-inflammatory and antioxidant benefits.
We talk about anti-inflammatory, the need for anti-inflammatory foods for the gut. Can you explain a little bit more about that and why that's important?
Well, I think in the Western world, we've come too far into sort of including too many processed foods in our diet, and we know these have an inflammatory effect in our bodies. So high refined carbohydrates, lots of sugars, processed foods generally are going to cause inflammation. And because they're so available and they're so easy to overeat, we have a bit of a problem with them. So the anti-inflammatory foods are the ones that are going to really help us rebalance our diet. So I think this goes back to having the diversity I was talking about earlier, and the diversity provides and gives us loads of vitamins and minerals. If we can include a range of different whole grain fibres and a range of different colours, we're getting benefits from all of those different sources. And together, that's going to reduce inflammation in our body. And we think that is because they influence our gut microbes. So the gut microbes that are in our gut, they will produce anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids in response to these foods. And actually, we know now that the short-chain fatty acids are really, really important for our overall health, and they can help to heal the gut lining. So in an inflamed state, the gut lining and the resilience of the gut is broken. And that can be from having a poor diet, could be from stress, medication, from having a pre-existing condition. But what we can do is turn the clock back a bit. And when we think that the gut lining is replaced every 5 to 7 days, this is quite exciting. We can start to put the foods in that nourish the gut, reduce the inflammation in the gut, help to build that resilience in the gut lining while we're building up the community of gut microbes that can produce these really, really important short-chain fatty acids that are going to reduce the inflammation.
That is the best explanation I've heard. Are there any foods that people think commonly are healthy, but actually aren't?
People think fruit juices, fruit smoothies, anything that's got like a fruit added to it is probably good for us or good for our gut health. And they're mostly laden with sugar or sweeteners, which is even worse. And so I think it's the liquid forms of these fruits that are probably the worst for us.
Prebiotics and probiotics. Could you just explain to us what they are and how they work?
Yes, so let's start with probiotics. So probiotics are foods that contain live bacteria. So that's things like live yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. These have beneficial bacteria in them because they're slowly fermented and the bacteria builds up in them, and they can be really good for our gut health. So they're probiotics. And the prebiotics are fibre-rich foods which feed and nourish the gut microbiome. So they feed the bacteria and help them to thrive inside our gut.
And they can't really live without each other, can they?
No, the bacteria that's in our gut need the fibres to stay alive. They're reliant on us to eat the fibre to nourish them so they can produce these all-important short-chain fatty acids which help our gut to be really healthy.
And does it mean if you eat more prebiotics, you have more probiotics in your gut?
You would think if you eat the right diet you're going to have much more diverse community of species of bacteria. And we know that there's not just good and bad bacteria. We don't just want the good bacteria. Actually, our diverse microbiome is made up of a community of beneficial and less beneficial species that live kind of in harmony. But the beneficial species, the good bacteria, keep the bad guys in check.
Tell me, what's your stance on dieting?
I hate it. I hate the idea of it. It's boring, it's dull, and it's not much fun. And it mostly doesn't work, is my take on it. So diet, anything that's been created to be a short-term fix or a solution to a problem, let's say it's a weight loss problem, are usually really restrictive in some way. They're possible to stick to for a short amount of time, only for us to get bored of them or we don't stick to them, and then we go back to eating the way we did before. What I prefer is actually focusing on the joy of food, of a really healthy, nutritious, balanced diet. Something that we can stick to and enjoy every day that doesn't include too much restriction, because actually the people that come to me with some of the worst problems with their gut have been on really restrictive diets for too long.
Really? Any particular diets that you would call out that have been particularly harmful to people's guts?
Yeah, I would say the FODMAP diet's probably one of the worst diets for long-term gut health. So it's a really good quick fix. It will get people to feel better, have less problems initially, but it's not the solution. We shouldn't ever be long-term restricting those sort of foods, because the FODMAP diet by its nature restricts these prebiotic fibers, and we need them. We know we need them to nourish the gut microbiome, and we also know that a healthy, diverse gut microbiome is linked to longevity, lower risk of disease, and so a low FODMAP diet long-term can be really, really destructive and quite harmful.
But in the short term, it might have a very useful benefit.
It might have. I would say never navigate that on your own. Seek professional guidance from someone who really does have the experience to guide you through that, because it doesn't actually have to be as painful and restrictive as maybe you might think when you Google that or look into a low FODMAP diet. It restricts so many food groups, so many healthy foods. And what you'll notice about the high FODMAP foods are they're all the foods that we should be encouraging people to eat more of. And so actually long-term restricting them is not the solution or the answer. So go and seek professional help and do it properly and safely, and get back to building your gut microbiome so you can enjoy your food again.
Beyond diet, what lifestyle habits kind of impact gut health?
Well, negatively, our gut microbiome and our gut health is definitely impacted by stress and sleep, poor sleep. And positive influences on our gut microbiome are exercise. In fact, a study was done on the powers of aerobic exercise, and it showed that it did have a positive influence on our gut microbes.
Right.
And also spending time with your food and enjoying your food. So the anticipation, creating, making the food helps to create that anticipation and digestive power of fire,
enjoyment of it,
to enjoy your food, and then sitting and enjoying eating your food.
Stress in particular, how does that affect our gut health?
Stress via this vagus nerve, we were talking about it earlier, about the connection between the gut and the brain. The stress signals actually fire up cortisol, which has an inflammatory effect, so that can cause some inflammation anyway. But it also disrupts digestion in other ways, because it affects your mood and your appetite. And so you might actually not reach for the foods that are healthy. In a stressful situation, some people will reach for caffeine, alcohol, sugar, refined carbs, all the things that kind of your body drives you to choose are probably not the right foods.
In fact, that's backed up by a survey we did 2 years ago, where 2/3 of people said they experienced worsening gut health when they were stressed.
The gut and the brain are so intrinsically connected.
You mentioned sleep. Why is sleep so important to our gut health?
I think our gut needs a rest too. And the microbes that live in our guts, there's trillions and trillions of microbes in there, and they're in the dark. They're in the dark environment inside our gut. And they are cued by our eating times and our exposure to daylight. So they are actually dependent on our circadian rhythm. So when we're not sleeping, they're not thriving, and they're maybe producing too many lipopolysaccharides or less beneficial byproducts of fermentation. And I think the gut just generally needs a rest, that rest period through sleep, where it's not having to deal with everyday stressors and not having to digest food. It's really important to give the gut that quiet time. And there is also some evidence about the migrating motor complex, which kicks in a state of fasting, which usually happens through our sleep. And that sweeping motion sweeps end-of-life bacteria, toxic waste, helps to sweep it out.
For someone struggling with bloating, what are your top tips?
The way you eat, rather than thinking about what you eat, although obviously that matters, if you're going to eat something that produces a lot of gas, then that's not going to be any surprise that you're going to get some bloating. But to counteract it, think about the way you eat and anticipate your food and chew your food carefully. And I think most of us are so time poor and we're rushing. We used to get a lunch hour break, like a whole hour.
Yeah.
Where's it gone?
Long time ago.
No one gets that anymore.
No.
I think that people eating on the go, I think it's partly the way we eat, the way that our stresses and time poor has got in the way of good eating habits, because we've got this whole mouthful of teeth to chew and grind our food. Are we really using them properly?
So true. Like use all your teeth. Use all your mouth.
Really chew it to a pulp and then help the food go down and then rest and digest. And no one's got time for it anymore.
Rest and digest.
Rest and digest afterwards.
Do you advocate lots of small meals or a few bigger meals during the day?
I'm not a fan of lots of different meals, but there are certain people who do benefit from that. So, for example, people who produce too much bile or they have a gallbladder removed, they might benefit from more frequent, smaller meals. But really getting all of your balanced nutrition in one meal takes you from one meal to the next meal, not needing the snacks, the constant snacking between, gives your gut that rest we were talking about.
I was about to say, that helps give the gut a
Yeah,
break.
so you can digest and really do something with the energy from that food rather than keep topping it up at intervals all the way through.
So is there such a thing as a healthy snack? Probably is.
You know,
but
piece of
actually,
fruit, handful of nuts. I mean, everyone might need that at times where they've been more active than others, or if you've had a bad night's sleep, you'll notice you'll need more snacks or you feel hungrier. So there are healthier snacks to have, but I think it's important to try and give the gut a rest as much as possible between meals. So I think focusing on breakfast, lunch, dinner in a way that gives you what you need.
it's a good start place.
Yes, I think that's a good place to start.
There are plenty of gut health supplements out there. There's digestive enzymes, there's probiotics, there's prebiotics, there's botanicals that help with bloating. What's your view on gut health supplements? Can they work? Do they work?
I think there's a really good place for them in certain situations for sure. So I've worked with people that have been on repeated antibiotics, and some people have even had to be on it for life for some drastic reasons. And so therefore they're going to need a probiotic to keep nourishing and keep that microbiome alive.
And in Europe, they prescribe quite routinely probiotics every time they prescribe antibiotics, don't they?
They do. That's right. And the prebiotics, I think if people have had a disordered gut microbiome for whatever reason, that can be a stressful event, or it could be needing to have had medication in the past, or having poor diet and not having enough fibre, then prebiotics are a really nice way to introduce more of the fibres that are going to nourish the gut microbiome in a healthy way. But they're not for everyone, and I think it's getting that specific advice, if you can, to choose the right thing for you, and obviously your life stage as well. Some people are going to benefit from probiotics, prebiotics and botanicals at different stages of their life more than others, menopause being one of the great reasons why some people really benefit.
So in the same way people take a daily multivitamin, which is a very common thing to do, the most common vitamin supplement taken is a daily multivitamin, would you advocate that it's a good idea to take a daily probiotic as well as a daily multivitamin?
I always take a food first policy, so I would always say get it in your food if you can. So actually starting your day with some live yogurt or kefir is a lovely way to do that without having to spend the money on the supplements. However, there are cases where probiotics can really make a difference. Some people really benefit from them. For example, if they're constipated or they're prone to constipation, probiotics seem to have this magical effect at helping you get your poo window back. If you go to the loo in the morning, that's a great way to start your day.
So we asked our customer services team to give to us the top questions asked by customers, most common questions about gut health. Number one on the list, why do probiotics sometimes cause excess gas, constipation or diarrhea?
Well, I think this comes down to the influence that the bacteria, adding more bacteria into your gut, it's a very individual thing. So I don't know what your gut microbiome looks like, but if you put a capsule of bacteria into that, and let's say there's quite a lot of bacteria there to start with, they're just going to have a party with it and they're going to ferment it. And it's the fermentation process, because the bacteria produce methane, hydrogen, that's the build-up of gas.
Yes.
But you can get yourself tolerant to it by smaller exposure to it. So taking a smaller dose and see how you get on. But I would really advise you get personalised advice. That's the best way to really manage that, because that might be a sign that something's not quite right. You can book a free discovery call with me on my website. It is free, so you can just book a call with me and I'll see how I can help you from there.
The second most common question by our customers: why does soluble fibre sometimes cause flare-ups in IBS? Do you recommend a particular diet for IBS sufferers?
Again, very individualised response to these different fibres, but from my experience, we have different diet styles and different levels of stress, and IBS is a hypersensitive gut. So it's sensitive to fibre, stress inputs, and also women's gut. The intestines 10 centimetres longer to navigate around reproductive organs. More twists and turns, more pockets of gas can build up. So actually it's a longer digestive process. And so interfering with that, with adding more probiotics or soluble fibres and things like that, can complicate the issue. But if you move upstream, it's really can be helped by working your digestive capacity upstream, thinking about chewing, relaxing, not eating when you're stressed, and sleeping, things like that.
So, and for IBS sufferers, and definitely get that people should seek help if they're really suffering IBS, what would be your one tip to someone suffering IBS?
Chew your food. Really simplistic first step, I would say, how are you eating? I'd really want to know what that looks like. A really helpful thing can be to keep a food diary and write it all down, everything you eat and drink and the timings, and see if you can spot a pattern. And if you can't spot the pattern, I will. So you can book your free discovery call with me and I'll see how I can help you. But it's noticing the pattern between certain food combinations quite often can be the key. It would be more difficult for someone to do who's probably not a nutritional therapist. However, you might spot it and you might see, oh, when I eat this food, some people might say bread causes more IBS, more bloating. Then you can start to think about how you might be able to change that combination of that meal as an experiment to see what happens on the food diary.
The third most common question from our customers: what is SIBO? Is it linked to IBS?
So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So where the bacteria have got into the wrong part of the intestine. So we want all our bacteria in the large bowel. That's the bit really below the belly button. And the small intestine is where you put your hand above the belly button, is this part. And when the bacteria are there, they're in a much smaller, tighter tube. And so their fermentation process of the food you're eating causes gas, and it's very uncomfortable because it's a much smaller tube to have that pressure in there. And so, yes, it is linked to IBS because it will cause those sensations of discomfort after eating in your gut.
So you're more likely to have SIBO if you've got IBS?
I wouldn't know if that was completely true, because IBS really relates to the irritability or the sensitivity of the entire gut. And some people feel it in different areas of their gut. But SIBO specifically relates to bacteria in the small intestine.
So one question we ask all our guests on the Dr. Vegan Will See You Now series is, what is one tip you would share with people to live a happier and healthier life?
Make more time for yourself to make better decisions, plan and prepare amazing food that you know is going to make you feel great long term. So just to make time, and make time for eating it, chew it properly. It's just all about the time around food. Food should be a joyous thing, should bring us all a lot of pleasure and happiness. And that means making a bit of time for not just preparing and choosing the right food, but the way we eat it to help our digestion do the very first bits it needs to do to help nourish our gut.
It's attributing more importance to the importance of food and how it can help us feel every day.
But we've come away so far from it. We're so time poor. And I think we need to reclaim that time around food. So that would be my one tip.
Great tip. Thank you, Evie, very much for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.